The Misconception of Judgment. Every human being is born with a natural disposition to judge. This instinct is essential for navigating the complexities of the human experience. Jesus, too, had this same disposition, as he was fully human, a son of man. Yet in his wisdom, he urged his followers to be cautious when passing judgment on others. His teachings were clear. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. Matthew 7, verse 1. Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. John 7:24. Jesus himself, however, was the embodiment of divine judgment, exemplifying a higher standard of discernment. But even if I do judge, my judgment is true, for I am not alone in it, but I and the Father who sent me. John 8:16. This profound statement illustrates that Jesus' judgment was not grounded in the petty standards of human reasoning, but in divine truth and love. It was not a judgment of condemnation, but of enlightenment. What Jesus taught was often misunderstood. The common misconception is that righteous judgment, as he spoke of it, is a harsh condemnation born from divine hatred for sin. However, this interpretation misrepresents the core of his message. When Jesus spoke of righteous judgment, he was not referring to the eye for an eye mentality, nor to stoning sinners or inflicting punishment as seen in the Old Testament under the judgment of Jehovah. These actions stemmed from the old system of judgment governed by human standards, those of control, violence, and fear. There is a clear distinction between righteous judgment and human judgment. Human judgment is often influenced by fear, bias, and self-interest, leading to punishment, torment, and division. It is rooted in ego and control. On the other hand, righteous judgment is rooted in love and compassion. It seeks to correct and restore, not to punish. Righteous judgment opens the door for growth and enlightenment, enabling individuals to awaken to the consequences of their actions and make amends. Jesus, by teaching this form of judgment, was fundamentally denouncing the human standards of judgment that Yahweh Jehovah, the God of the Old Testament, embodied. Jehovah's judgment was violent and ruled by anger, echoing the behavior of human kings and rulers who governed through fear and punishment. Jesus, in contrast, taught a radical, transformative approach: turn the other cheek and forgive all transgressions. This is not a God of wrath and vengeance, but a God of mercy, love, and eternal forgiveness. The judgment Jesus described was not the threat of hellfire or eternal damnation, as it is often portrayed. It was not the judgment of torment and punishment by a wrathful deity. Instead, it was the judgment of awakening, an awakening to the reality of our divine nature. When we come to understand who we truly are in Christ, we begin to view our actions, both good and bad, through the lens of the higher self, our Christ consciousness. This process is not one of eternal condemnation, but of self-realization. There is no eternal punishment, for Jesus ministered to the lost souls, those considered sinners, and this shows that salvation and correction were always possible. As it is written, he was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit, in which he also went and preached to the imprisoned spirits who disobeyed long ago, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. These imprisoned spirits were not condemned by God, but trapped by their ignorance. They believed in a false God and died in their own self-created sins. It is this ignorance that keeps humanity in bondage, an ignorance that can only be lifted by awakening to the truth of who we are in Christ. The misconception that God is wrathful and judgmental, akin to the God of the Old Testament, has been deeply ingrained in many spiritual traditions. People often confuse the judgment spoken of by Jesus with the violent and vengeful judgment that Jehovah supposedly enacted. This false belief has led many to fear God rather than to revere and love him. The fiery brimstone, hellfire imagery, and visions of eternal torment have become synonymous with divine judgment. Yet these are misinterpretations. The book of Revelation, often cited as evidence of divine wrath, is a symbolic text, not a literal one. The language used there describes spiritual truths, not physical punishments. Jesus' teachings were not about eternal torment, but about spiritual awakening. Judgment, in the context of Christ's message, is an awakening to the truth of our divine nature, leading us to correct our past mistakes and reconcile with our true selves. This judgment is not about damnation, but about salvation, restoration, and the revealing of the light within us. The judgment that Jesus spoke of was not out of anger or wrath. It was an act of divine love aimed at the soul's growth, enlightenment, and eventual reunion with the Creator. Contrary to the judgment of the false god, which was based in ego and control, the judgment of Christ is about love and compassion, recognizing our errors and seeking to correct them without fear of condemnation. The confusion surrounding judgment comes from the false assumption that the God of the Old Testament, the vengeful Jehovah, is the same God that Jesus referred to as the Father. This confusion has clouded our understanding of Jesus' teachings. Jesus knew that the God the Jews worshipped was not the true God. It was a distorted version of the divine, characterized by fear, wrath, and punishment. Yet he could not openly denounce this God without jeopardizing his mission and life. This is why Jesus often spoke in parables and made statements that, when misinterpreted, seemed to align with the old teachings. In truth, however, he was radically opposed to the God of the Old Testament. His message was not one of fear and condemnation, but of love and redemption. Jesus came to reveal the true nature of the Father, not a God of punishment, but a God of forgiveness, mercy, and unconditional love. The deception that has plagued humanity is the belief that the false God of the Old Testament is the true God of love. This misconception has been passed down through generations, taught by authority figures, parents, pastors, and teachers, whose own beliefs were shaped by fear, tradition, and ignorance. The seed of deception was planted long ago, leading to the fall of man, where humanity began to live in fear, separated from the divine truth. This fear-based mindset has prevented many from questioning the narrative they have been taught. They accept without questioning, "This is what I was taught, therefore it must be true." This gullible mindset has been the root of much spiritual ignorance. The truth, however, is clear. The God of wrath and punishment is not the true God, but a distortion of the divine truth. Judgment, as taught by Jesus, is not a harsh, punitive action, but a loving act of awakening. It is the realization of who we truly are in Christ and the correction of our errors through love and understanding. Once we shed the fear-based human standards of judgment, we open ourselves to the light of divine truth, a truth that brings not condemnation, but restoration and ultimately salvation.